And now I'd love to introduce Barry Broome, President and CEO of the Greater Sacramento Economic Council. Barry?
Okay, I'm going to counter everything he just said. No, I'm kidding. I was like, that's not right. Kidding. Well, thank you for having me, Joe. Thank you for having me. Obviously, we're 6 years old in August. So the Greater Sacramento Economic Council was formed in 2015 by about 6 or 8 CEOs with a couple public figures and the university presidents around how to develop a more sustainable and independent economy from the government. So I'm going to give you just a kind of a brief overview of what we're working on, what our progress is, and why we formulate this way. So this is what the market looks at when it looks at our community. You know, it's looking at a work shed, it's looking at a labor base, it's looking at buying power. If you look at this place, this is what people look like when they want to move here. So if you're looking to move here, you're going to look at a place like this. If you're looking to do business here, you're going to run an analytics platform. And you're going to assess engineers, you're going to assess technical expertise, CFOs, CEOs, capital, international markets. And so when you aggregate your entire market, which is what all of our competitors do, it gives you a chance to leverage your assets, give people a single point of contact to work with on evaluating the market, but also gives you the leverage to do the outreach and promote the market to investment and job channels like site selection consultants, the E&Ys, the location services at JLL. So most of these investment business decisions are really handled by consulting networks on behalf of the company versus the companies directly handling that. So it's our ability to create a market and interface evenly with these consulting networks and constantly educate and update them on the progress of the market so that when their clients are assessing and evaluating markets, we get requirements. Requirements is basically like an RFI. So whenever we design and build the economy, we always do it around requirements, and then we give feedback to our communities. We always give them the direction on what changes need to be made in their community to increase their requirement possibilities of investment and jobs. And right now, that's mostly real estate in our town. So another reason why we work regionally, here we are in Folsom. 16% of Folsom residents get their job from Folsom. So about 84% of Folsom residents are going somewhere in the region or somewhere in Northern California for a job. So it's really more about what the economic performance is of jobs, wages, how novel they are, how independent they are of government, obviously how independent they are of consumption. And then those jobs drive all the bottom line demand that allow for projects like Folsom Ranch, allow for Westfield Mall to stay on its feet, allow for Arden Mall maybe one day to get recovered. So building a common practice among all communities makes sense because they share the same assets and they need each other to perform economically and on the job base. And if you look at Roseville, that's about 14%. So, Folsom and Roseville actually import labor from the other communities and create jobs for the other communities. And that's kind of why you're centers of excellence with your quality of life and your amenities. So we've had 6 locates and jobs and about 600 jobs since July. So basically, what we do on our model is we run one single business platform. So think about your community being turned into a business platform. And then we build a business platform and Choose Folsom can plug into it. We build a business platform and Roseville can plug into it. We build a business platform and Sac State can plug into it. Right? So you're creating a single business platform so people can assess and measure it, and then you're making that user-friendly. So we're going to announce probably another 6 companies with 2,000 jobs in about the next 90 days. So a good year for us is about 15 transactions. And in the last few years, our rate of transactions competed with like Portland and Atlanta. But, we are in California, and so, we're off of probably 95% of all lists just by being in California because of the liability created by the government, more so even than the taxes. So it's true that we're essentially off so many people's lists because they don't trust the government with any degree of consistency, and then the cost base is just so upside down compared to markets. So the average cost of a job in our market's about $25,000 higher than the average cost of a job in Denver, or the average cost of a job in Salt Lake, or the average cost of a job in Austin. So as you multiply that out, that differentiator gets more demanding. And mostly what we're able to do with companies that come here is people that are on the early stage of design and the early stage of the creation of products are still find us very attractive. But once they get downstream and start getting into a larger production model, like you saw, Muscly for Texas, there's too much market interference in California for people to make sense to add the 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 jobs, because each one of those jobs is $25,000 higher than Salt Lake, Austin, and Phoenix. So it makes a lot more sense when you're scaling jobs to leave California, and that's mostly what we see in the out-migration of California. So obviously people don't move here by themselves. We had almost 44,000 people move here during the pandemic. I've made 2,135 presentations one-on-one between San Francisco and San Jose. So I spent about 3 years, 3 days a week in between San Francisco and San Jose. And I called on everybody from the custodian to the receptionist to any higher level. I used to tease my board. My first 3 years, I felt like the Fuller Brush salesman, So, and that was really important because that market didn't say good things about us. One of the first experiences I had in the community was a company came here, they were evaluating us, they went down to the Bay Area, they had a law firm down there, and when they told the law firm they were looking at the Greater Sacramento region, it's about 2015, the law firm didn't have a lot of great things to say about us. So how that market views us is really important, not only from the attraction of talent standpoint and capital, but anybody making a significant investment in here is probably down in that market either evaluating it or getting a lot of professional support out of that market. And if they're not saying strong things about us, it really hurts us. And I will say, after 6 years, we have flipped the narrative in the Bay Area and Silicon Valley about our region. I mean, they at least have favorable and positive things to say about us. And that was a lot of work. So this is the Next Out West campaign. So this just got the top award in the United States of America. It was our branding and marketing campaign to attract talent here, Michelle Willard and Jasmine Ward. Does anybody know Jasmine? So by the way, just I have 4 Folsom natives working for us. So my head of marketing is a Folsom native, Jasmine Ward. So she designed this, and we zero in. So these people that are moving up here, we're running hand-to-hand combat on LinkedIn accounts between San Francisco and San Jose, targeting engineers and targeted highly educated people between the ages of 28 and 34. So we have an entire demographic profile that gets an ongoing campaign about the lifestyle, quality of life here. And then when we talk to companies, it's more about the technical expertise and our ability to deliver bottom line value to a company. So this has been incredibly successful. And of course, as I mentioned, it got the highest award in the U.S. among our industry profile. So, in fact, that's the second year in a row. So 2 years in a row, we've had the highest rated marketing campaign in the U.S. among our peers. That includes the Austin Chamber, the Seattle Partners, so on and so forth. So I don't know if we're sticking or if I'm sticking. Clicker's not working. There we go. Great. So when you saw a little bit on from Sanjay about skills gaps, one of the biggest challenges we have in the community is the skill gap situation that occurs between our workforce and a changing technical workforce. So we're in the process right now with Accenture in revisiting the Sacramento Employment Training Agency. So Sacramento County has an employment training agency that gets about $26 million a year, and they spend $42,000 per job placement. So that basically means we could be giving everybody a 4-year degree at Sac State, plus room and board in exchange for the training they're getting through the Sacramento Employment Training Agency. The wage placement rate's about $35,000. So when we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and some of the issues in our community, we're running everybody through a low-skilled training program, spending a lot of money on it, and at the end of the day, we're placing them in a low-wage job that's usually consumption-based. So it's not exactly addressing our skills gap. So Accenture's on our board now, and we're in the process of really trying to disrupt workforce in our community. I don't have to tell you guys what political bureaucracies are like in California. They are tough to move. And there's not enough accountability on these bureaucracies, and there's not enough transparency. So we've literally spent about a year pulling apart all of our workforce systems, and I think we're making some progress on this. But the reason I had this up, I don't know if you saw Fox did an all-day piece on us, Fox National, on this digital upskilling. And it was just really a model that we developed in my basement during COVID with Buffalo Trace. So I just want to tell you, after a couple of shots of Buffalo Trace, I can design some pretty cool digital upskilling programs. So yeah, as the world was dying, and I thought we're living in our basements forever, I better start learning what this is. So that's actually true, but it wasn't 2 shots. It was really more like a couple of old fashions because I'm classy, So we designed this, and we got on the phone and we called Microsoft's trainers and Google's trainers and said, hey, have you ever trained people from underserved backgrounds? They obviously train people of color, but not from underserved backgrounds. And so they brought in a partner called Merit America, which is a national group that's bringing hard skills to underserved communities and people, and did a joint venture. And we spent $9,000 getting people between $55,000 and $85,000 a year. So we're designing these prototypes that are designed to kind of disrupt these kind of old school workforce models. And, one of the things we proved from that is that, being underserved or being a person of color doesn't mean you can't work at Intel. It doesn't mean you can't work at Microsoft. It just means too many of our training programs, immediately think you should be handed a broom or handed, a chopping knife to work in the back of a kitchen. And there's nothing wrong with those jobs. I had plenty of those jobs growing up in Ohio. But those are hard jobs to raise a family on. So a lot of this is about reimagining workforce and about how we think about human capital and talent, and then, seeing everybody as we see ourselves, right? I mean, I want to live in a place like this. Well, so does everybody else. Well, you got to get the skills to them and get the employment to them as well to do that. So next slide. I think we're all slided out here. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about some regional projects. So you saw Sanjay's talking about genomics, right? Cell therapies and genomics. Aggie Square is a cell therapeutic genomic platform. So the good news is we're aligned on those things, right? So basically, what we did with Aggie Square is we pitched Gary May when he was still in Atlanta at Georgia Tech. Kevin Nagel, Mark Friedman, myself, Donna Lucas. You probably know some of those guys. You probably know Kevin. And we went down and basically said, UC Davis, there's 10 universities doing $1 billion in research in the United States. I mean, UC Davis is one of them. And, when I came to the community and I met with UC Davis, they told me in 2015 they were a Bay Area university. This is how far we've come and how far away we were without an organized effort. So, a lot of them come from the Bay Area. They get their PhDs out of Berkeley. They didn't even see themselves as a Greater Sacramento University. We only captured 10% of their graduates. That was the worst capture rate in the United States of America. So when you got an R1 university doing $1 billion in research, they think they're in San Francisco and you only capture 10% of the kids, that's a real missed opportunity. So how that university thinks about the region and how that leadership forms is going to drive this economy more. How much does Stanford drive Silicon Valley? How much does Berkeley drive it? And so we've had this incredible asset that has been sterile sitting over the causeway, working internally and then leaning into the San Francisco market instead of leaning into ours. So this is now a $2.2 billion project, mostly due to the lawsuits. That was true, but funny, isn't it? So, yeah, I'd like to say it was an additional $1 billion in capital. We've been sued 4 times by organized labor. These guys do a lot for the CapEx on these projects. I don't know if you know that. So if you want your CapEx to go up, all you got to do is get sued by SCIU or AFSCME, and it just starts going up. It's amazing. I never underestimated the impact they had on our economy. So I'd like to see what the impact is on the net operating income, something they don't do a lot of math of down at SCIU. So this is a $2.2 billion project. And it's anchored by the Cambridge Innovation Group, and that's a 100,000 square foot product. So the Cambridge Innovation Group's the commercialization arm of MIT and Harvard. So this will be their only 3rd location in the U.S. So you have a 100,000 square foot accelerator with capital building biotech companies at Aggie Square. Plus, you'll have an R1 university now leading into your town. One of the things I always remind my colleagues regionally, Aggie Square is on 10 acres. And it's going to spin out probably 15 to 20 companies a year. So one of the questions for us regionally is what are we going to do with those companies? Are we going to let them migrate back down to San Francisco because there's infrastructure for biotech, San Diego, Seattle? Or are we going to continue to try and build and develop more science enterprise? Of all the things we are a science community. We're world-class veterinarian science, best in the world, food, ag, biomedical, genomics, life science. And then when you look at the real estate, it has no characteristics of life science corridors. So this is part of the maturation of the project, right? So when you're doing your community economic development planning, you got to be looking for developers that have the capacity to put in life science infrastructure, which is uniquely different than office or industrial, because that's where all the action is. And to give you a couple of examples, like Origin Materials is going public. That's the UC Davis spinout. It has a chance to single-handedly change the entire economy in the region. And, part of the other conversation on diversification is to continue to move away from the government. So I'll give you something that's statistically kind of interesting. We were 40% dependent upon the government. We're now like 30% dependent upon the government. So we've brought that down from 40 to 30. We need to bring that down to 20. If we get it down to 20, we'll be like a Columbus, Ohio, or an Indianapolis. But if you look at downtown Sacramento right now, one of the things that's hurting it is SEIU is demanding remote work from the state. And that's 80% of the daytime foot traffic in downtown Sacramento. So a lot of the developers are down there are suffering from that. But the problem is, who's going to, what are you doing monetizing and economically betting on the state government of California? So we need to continue to push ourselves away from that government, move into the economic future, like genomics, like you saw from Sanjay's development, and then continue to connect our people in a hard skill set into the industry of the future while building employment centers throughout the region. You saw I'm talking about clean tech and electric vehicles. We launched a California Mobility Center, and that's fully operational now. And this is a big challenge for us in California. We were first to the market in the country around this mobility center. So if you look up Aachen University, which I'm sure you'll anxiously do when you're done here, that's AAAUCCHH, I'm joking, but it's in Germany. And, I'm an Ohio, Michigan guy, so if you want to learn how to build cars, you always go to Germany. That's how it works. I spent the first part of my career hanging out with GM, Ford, and Chrysler. So I went to Germany, and we were in Silicon Valley, and we were talking to a company that had built this modern prototype electric vehicle engine. And it was unbelievable, and there was only 5 people. And we asked them, how the heck's 5 people build and prototype a perfect electric vehicle engine? That had to be millions of dollars. And they said, no, we got it designed by Penn Motion at Aachen University. So literally we flew to Aachen University, and Penn Motion has sent 4 engineers to Sacramento to live, working with Sac State's engineering school and SMUD. And I want to give a real shout out to SMUD, who's flat out put the California Mobility Center on their back and pulled it off. So, we have almost $35 million in a venture fund. There are 50 startup companies connected to the California Mobility Center. And basically, it's a hardware engineering design plan. That's essentially what it is. So if you're looking to develop new battery technology, engine technology, maybe you're thinking of powertrain capabilities, hopefully you'll come into our region and get your design work done by Penn Motion with the California Mobility Center with engineers from UC Davis and Sac State. The other reason why that's important, I talked about the lack of capture rate of UC Davis. We had a 70% capture rate of Sac State, but we weren't really capturing any of their engineers. And so, the whole game's about engineers. So now if you look at Sac State, its engineering program has been built more for aerospace, defense, and semiconductor. Now, we are getting a comeback from semiconductor, thank heavens, with Intel here. But the aerospace defense industry is long gone here. So there needs to be another industry vertical that gets introduced into the engineering platforms at our universities that are tied to our local economy, so that when we invest in our engineering schools, we're actually getting an economic return as a region. So Robert Nelson, who's done a fantastic job at Sac State, is now pivoting Sac State engineering towards modern mobility, including a PhD in e-mobility. So these are long-term plays, but as I said, we got about 50 startups connected to it. Lions Electric's R&D is in Sacramento County. But, these are big upsides. And one of the mistakes that the community's made historically is you get in early or you don't get in at all. So being in early at cell therapies, being in early on mobility is really important. And then, of course, the Ford Motor Company's head of autonomous vehicles is on the board, the chief financial officer of Toyota Research, and then the head of Microsoft's autonomous division's on the board of the California Mobility Center in Sacramento. And Arlen Orchard deserves a lot of credit for that. So we'll see how we do with this. This will be a big test for us because it's an enterprise, and we tend to governmentize enterprises, slow them down. So it's a constant battle culturally on the California Mobility Center to get it a lot of resources from Sac State and UC Davis, but not emulate it in its operating model, right? So it's going to operate like a company, yet it's got to be leveraged by the community assets. And then, we've launched a fintech consortium as well that has a lot of opportunity. Riskalyze, as I'm sure you're probably aware of, nearby is on fire. So we're doing really well. And so when Sanjay talked a little bit about employers with more than 1,000 people, we don't look at the economy that way. We look at the economy, are you participating in the new economy? Are you participating in the emerging economy? And then are you building compelling companies? So I think Power School is a compelling company. It's well less than 1,000 employees in Folsom, but it's done an IPO. Robert Smith is its private equity investor. Inductive is another compelling company. So we're perfectly happy. The problem that we've had really is we haven't been focusing on new industries, and we haven't been making bold moves into new industries, and we don't focus on compelling companies. Because I'll give you some other examples. How many of you heard of Trifecta? You heard of that? Okay, they're doing $100 million in sales. 4 years ago, we gave that guy $50,000 to drag him up here. He's doing $100 million in sales in 4 years. Zenify has got 300 or 400 employees. $50,000 grant. We got him up here. A guy from Roseville and some kid from San Francisco. They now have a Salesforce partnership, and Salesforce is now their biggest equity investor. So a company like Zenify could go to 1,000, 2,000 employees in 24 months. And 3 years ago, we got them for $50,000. Rhombus Systems, Jesuit kids that went down and got their MBAs out of Stanford, they're sitting on 300 or 400 engineers now. We got them for $100,000. I'm setting Elaine up for an ask. That's why I'm doing this. So Elaine's like, why is he doing this? I've only asked her for $1 million, and that is not a lot. I really need $500,000, so you know how she'll cut it in half, but she didn't like to say no. All right. Phil's like, just get us a half. We'll be thrilled. You're welcome. Yeah, exactly. Little coaching. It goes a long way. So one of the things we're doing with these communities is hey, how do you set aside, right? We have all this recovery dollars going. What are we doing with it? We're putting it into consumption-based economies, right? What are consumption-based economies? They're completely tied to the performance of Power School and Inductive and Zenify and those schools. I mean, you're not buying houses out here, because you're working in a retail store. You're buying out here is because you have an executive compensation package. So, believe it or not, from a community perspective, those are the only things we can even affect, right? The pandemic came out and flattened the economy again. We were victims of it, right? So, if you put your money into novel, new things, so the communities need to think like a venture capitalist. We want to be in the newest, most cutting-edge things, and then we want to put our time and energy in there. And those are the things that will scale and give us the payoff. And then, I think you'll see Zenify, Trifecta, Rhombus Systems, Reviver. Reviver's a company that's looking to go public. We took them out of Foster City to Roseville. Same thing, $100,000 development grant. They're sitting on 50 people, black-owned, drawing down national venture capital and preparing for an IPO. So Reviver could be 1,000 employees. So the key thing on these tradable sectors that are novel is they scale. Right? 2011, Uber was in 500 square feet. In 2011. 2013, they were all billionaires. So this is kind of the philosophy behind us. Obviously, engaging our economy is really important. I'm going to take you down to the last slide because everybody hears enough from these things. So why don't you take me to, is that the last slide? No, there's a little looks like the NBC Peacock. All right? Yeah, just go through all this. See how much pain and go back. There you go. See how much suffering I saved you. You can tell I have a CEO board. I mean, when you're running out of time with the CEO, there's like a trap door underneath your feet, and you're getting ready to say something really cool, and all of a sudden you're going down a slide, like you're on a Bond movie. Okay. So these are some of our big visions, right? So we had the MLS black eye, right? It probably shouldn't be called a black eye, but it is a black eye, right? And, we would love to have an MLS bid. But, one of the things we can't do is allow external forces drive our internal market. So any Sac State alum here? What if Sac State was Boise State in football? Would we enjoy that as a community? So that's what we're rolling out, but don't tell anyone. So we're going to be hopefully rolling out. We've been in conversations with the chancellor and Robert's game. But it's like, why are we waiting for some billionaire from L.A. to come and save us? I hate that. That's the blue collar of me in Ohio. I don't like billionaires anyway, unless they're on my board, and I like them a lot. But, what if Sac State were at Boise State levels? And, they're pretty competitive. They gave Cal a game. So we're negotiating right now with the chancellor of the Cal State system. Would you allow us to go into the next level of Division I? You're going to have a big shakeup with these Power Fives. San Diego State just built a 35,000-seat stadium with the Cal State system paying for it. What if we had a joint venture between Kevin Nagel and the Cal State system, and Cal State can now get a brand new stadium for $150 million, which is exactly the public delta we need to pull that stadium off. So we've gotten a verbal yes on that, so we're going to be working really hard on that. That requires us to run a capital campaign for Sac State among the business community. But, this is what you don't want to do coming out of recovery, is you don't want to come out with your shoelaces tied together. So eventually MLS is going to announce, I would think, that they're not coming to our community, that they're going to choose a San Diego or a Vegas. Maybe they won't. But if they do, I don't want to be caught flat-footed. So I'd rather be rolling out Sac State to a Boise State level football program and thinking about taking our own university to the next level than waiting for something I have no control over. And by the way, if we ever want someone to come in and back our team up, they'll be a lot more excited if we have momentum around something like that. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that. Future of work, and we have to implode our workforce programs. But take, Folsom Community College. It's probably the best community college in the region, right? Why is that? Because it sits next to Intel. Intel teaches Folsom Community College what to do. That's why Stanford, they teach each other, right? So, when you have a future of work that's completely disconnected from the modern economy, not only do you exacerbate the skills gap and fail to achieve diversity, equity, and inclusion, but there's no knowledge sharing between people, right? So if you look at Folsom Community College, why is it that strong? What we just mentioned, right? So now if you look at where we're going in the future, what are our workforce models? Are they going to look more like Folsom? Are they going to look more like, Job Corps, right? So we want to get out of the Job Corps business. Let the federal government fund Job Corps. We need to move up the food chain and move everybody up with us to close these labor issues, but also bring these personal incomes up so people can continue to live here and buy cars and produce it. Democrats love national labs. Have you ever been to who's been to a national lab? Ever been to Livermore and toured it? Has anyone ever seen the lab up front? Okay, he has. Okay. So a national lab, fully built out, 5,000 to 7,000 people. It's another university in your town. They can do anywhere from $1 to $3 billion in research. The semiconductor industry spun out of a Bell Lab in New Mexico. So I was in Arizona 10 years, so I know too much about this. So I could actually give you a long lecture on how the semiconductor industry was formed in America. But, obviously these national labs have produced the semiconductor industry. It's produced the internet. It's produced a lot of really high-powered assets. So one of the things we want to do is take the California Mobility Center, which is now a university-led economic development model with industry partnerships, and move it up to where it becomes a national lab. And I really do believe there's going to be a competition for national labs in the next 2 to 4 years. And I got to believe electric vehicles and sustainable clean tech mobility is going to be at the centerpiece with our two universities, the California Air Resource Board being in this market, which is the chief regulator for the industry. We ought to be able to put together a plan for this. But these are the kind of things we got to throw our elbow into hard. These aren't things that come easy. These are big moves. You got to raise tens of millions of dollars for support for these assets. So it's not just going to be me as a talking head. We're going to have to do this as a community. And then obviously new enterprise formation. So we're going to be, how many of you know Mark Haney? I know he's a Placer County guy, but Mark Haney Biz, Mark Haney Enterprises, he's got his own radio show. But we've been helping him launch an accelerator. We also want an accelerator at the schoolhouse with Choose Folsom. We need to think in terms about how that comes to life. We do have some cool European companies that we've been working with Joe and Phil on that have chosen it. And by the way, they're digital, like our training program. And by the way, they all have fintech interfaces going on. So your fintech's going to almost be like the internet. It's going to explode so big. And then last but not least, how do we work more closely with our chambers? Because, I've been very disappointed in the statewide business effort to mount an offense against the state government's continued gerrymandering of the free market, and doing so at the behest of special interest groups, not because they're sitting around thinking cleverly about it. Somewhere along the line, as a business group, we're going to have to learn how to fight back against labor's influence over the government. I don't think it's labor. I just have something against them designing the economic model for the state when they're not a participant, and most of them look at the free market and nonprofit companies as negative. So it's a comprehensive plan, right? We're not just doing business recruitment. We're doing design work. Obviously, we build the brand and the reputation of the market. We maintain the analytics. We had a little better analytics on our performance. Going into June, we were outperforming California and the U.S. I'll have to look at the data to see what would have made us look like we slipped. Maybe we were pulling different data points. But we've got the market recovering faster than California. But what we don't want to do is just, recover on population growth, right? We want to recover on excellence. We want to get our hips turned around on these industries. We want people to talk about us. I have a huge ego. I don't have a problem with that. You know what I mean? I want people to talk about us. I want people to talk about us like they talk about Austin. And I know you're like that. And I know there's pockets of us like that. But all of us got to be like that. If somebody has a negative story about our community, that should fire up everybody. If someone's talking about who's the most exciting place in the future, that should be us. And even in spite of the complexity of California state government, we landed, probably the biggest R&D investment we've ever landed about 3 months ago. $500 million, 400 researchers, and the company took their 35 researchers out of Menlo Park, which I hear is a pretty talented research base, and moved them to Sacramento County and expanded it to 400. So now this company, which is headed towards an IPO, we're their entire R&D base. And do you know why they haven't been announced? They said, you can't announce. I said, why not? Because, that would be something I'd want to announce. We don't want to get sued by the government. That's literally what the company told me. So we haven't even been able to do a press announcement. So they said, at build out, when we're fully operational, you can do a press announcement, because I don't want somebody from the California Attorney General showing up. This is literally the level of interference that's going on by the state government. The people that come here and make investments want to keep their head down because they're afraid during the process, after they've selected us, they're going to run into market interference. And Aggie Square has been sued 4 times, and that project has been held up 12 months. And, it's an outrageous level of liability that the government is creating for us. If you want our taxes, I won't complain, but you can't really tell us how to run our businesses. So we're going to have to figure out a way to be more actionable and more aggressive with regard to the budget. With regard to the government. So that was a little bit longer. Good thing I skipped 19 slides. But thank you for your time. Are there any questions? Thank you.